We're live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 9th meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. All of our council is here with us tonight, as well as the CAO and the Deputy CAO. If you're at home watching us on YouTube, when the meeting has concluded, there will be an opportunity for you to ask any questions you might have about any issue that was discussed in tonight's agenda. So, without further ado, you do have an agenda that was mailed out to you. What is your wish?
So moved.
Moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Burdick. On the question, approval of the agenda? All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting of January the 28th. Deputy Mayor?
I was just curious, just like last time, whether council would be willing to move an agenda item up. And that is the 6.6 town logo review to make it 6.2 if possible.
Council? No objections? Everyone agrees? Okay, Deputy Mayor will move 6.6 up to just in front of 6.2. So it becomes 6.1A, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mayor, I'd move that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 28th as submitted.
do we have a seconder?
Second.
Any comment on the question? All in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to item number 4, correspondence action items. We have 2 in the pile. Deputy Clerk, will you speak to those? Or Councillor Feeney, you had your hand up.
Mayor, with regard to 4.1, I'm happy to make a motion if you'll hear it.
Yes, please.
Mayor, I'd move the council direct staff to complete due diligence on the associated cost to install a water line extension to the standard demarcation point of the Cleveland home, which is located on Fairmont Street, and report back to council.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Now. Comments? If we were to extend the water line from the top of Fairmont down the hill to Mr. Cleveland's house, why would we not consider to go to the back of the street to the cul-de-sac in consideration of future development or other homes that way wish to be connected? CAO?
Yeah, that's certainly what I would expect us to look at. If it's feasible to do it at all, then it may be feasible to do it all the way down to the end of the road. And where the road is dirt there, it's a lot of the cost is the repaving, so we have to do that. But yeah, well, we can, if this passes, we can certainly look into this, and there's time before budget, so maybe give the indication that this is likely to be considered in the annual budget process. It will probably not be an immediate response to this request, in that case.
Okay. Councillor Burdick, you had a comment?
Yeah, it was just, I didn't know where the property was on Fairmont, if it was in a residential, like an unserviced residential area at the moment. And that's why that's happening, because it does seem to make sense that if there are other properties in the area they might also want this water to be in place.
Is it, if I could, is it reasonable to include, when staff are investigating the feasibility of extending the water line, is it feasible to look at extending the sewer line? I realize there would have to be a lift pump involved, but it seems difficult that we've got homes in town that are being taxed and they don't have sewer or water. for very good technical reasons, but
Mhm.
it's time to deal with them, I would think. Councillor
I
Wilson.
Isn't this part and parcel of the discussion that we're going to have later this evening about this proposed bylaw for cost sharing? Is this would be one of those, this would be one of those exercises, if I'm not mistaken?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the spirit of the motion is just to provide staff some direction to start the due diligence
To
process,
investigate.
which I'm sure it'll take several months. But if we'd like to amend the motion to be more expansive, to talk about a line extension to the end of Fairmont, and give staff the latitude to evaluate the entire package, fair enough.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, now you had a comment at the same time as Mr. Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I just agree that, anywhere we can extend our services, if we can extend both services at the same time, I think it would certainly make sense. We're saying about our water utility so that we want to get more customers online. So we have the opportunity to do it. I think we should be looking at that.
Thank
So
you. CAO, you were going to comment?
Yeah, just with the, I think Councillor Wilson made a good point, is that if we have done what this motion calls for and come back with a number, then that's a good place to start. If we have a bylaw that would allow us to then work with whichever properties would front on this, would benefit from this proposed line, and look at the possibility of some kind of cost sharing arrangement. So the first step would still be to cost it and look at the feasibility of it. And then parallel to that, that bylaw is still under consideration by council. So I just wanted to say that was a good point.
Okay, thank you.
So
Any
Mayor,
other, Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I think what council's looking for is an amendment to that motion that says that instead of the cost to install a water line extension to the Cleveland home, we want to have that change to, the end of Fairmont Street.
Yes.
I think that's
Water and sewer. Okay,
fair enough.
so you've heard the amended motion. We're now talking about a motion to have staff investigate extending the water line and the sewer line to the end of Fairmont Street, which is well beyond the Cleveland home.
Mhm.
Comments on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, the second item, Mahone Bay Garden Club. Is that yours, clerk, or CAO?
Well, I can put it up on the screen if you'd like. I have it in front of me here. 1 second.
Councillor Kerr?
Yes, I'm just wondering if there could be some clarification provided about which entrance we're looking at. Are we looking at the Claremont Street side of the little walkway, or the bridge, the other side of the bridge?
It's my understanding on this that we're talking about on Claremont Street where the bridge begins in the
Yes.
parking area. Yeah, and that's where Derek and I, to the point about the meeting in the fall of 2019, that's where we spoke with them and indicated, as well as they say, it's a very discreet entrance. So, I wanted to suggest that signage obviously would work in well with this if we're doing a wayfinding project. And while strictly speaking, it doesn't include a sign for this park, I do expect that as that project goes forward, there's a good opportunity to consider some of these specific location identifiers. So this would be a nice one. I don't think it should have a generic sign like the rest of the wayfinding. It probably should be fairly unique to this location,
Mhm.
but maybe a stage 2 with that signage project.
Thank
Well,
you.
I
Councillor
would like-
Carver?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that the town work with the Mahone Bay Garden Club to make that entrance to the water gardens more beautiful,
Hmm, Okay.
as per the letter from the garden club.
Councillor Burdick?
I guess the question that I would have, and this would be maybe where staff comes in, is to find out the cost of removing the concrete forms that they're talking about and the installation, the purchase and installation of these large boulders. Because I know
Okay.
these things are heavy in both cases.
Before we go to Councillor Burdick's suggestion, can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Councillor Burdick, we're asking staff to investigate the cost of,
Yes, so I'm not sure if that's a second motion.
I think that would be, for the budget purposes, CAO,
Right.
would it not be an appropriate determination by staff?
Yeah, I would see this, either we haven't determined yet as a capital or operating project. And so we always have a list of those going into the budget. And in the past, they've often included this kind of project where a community group is working with us. So like the wayfinding project with the chamber. But I don't know, maybe we just want to look at the wording of the motion as it stands to make sure that it captures that process that council would understand. There'd be something coming back to budget. Mo, would you mind reading the motion back?
That council work with the Mahone Bay Garden Club to improve the appearance of the entrance to the water gardens as per the letter to council.
So I guess in that way, maybe the suggestion, if the mover and seconder would agree to, would be to the staff work with the garden club to come back to council with a specific costed proposal to improve the entrance to the garden club as per the original wording.
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Councillor Burdick, you agree? Okay.
Yes.
You've heard the adjusted motion. Any question or any comments on the question? All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go on to section 5, correspondence for information purposes.
Mhm.
Councillor Feeney?
Hi, Mayor, but just before we receive and file, I do think it would be appropriate, and I'd make a motion to direct staff to acknowledge the correspondence of Mr. Uden and Ms. Cole, thanking them for providing their perspectives on important town issues and just providing that feedback to some of the town's youth. That town council is open for business, and we're very pleased to hear anything that's on their minds.
Okay, good idea. Thank you.
Second
Anything
that.
else? Councillor
Second.
Carver?
I'm just seconding the motion.
That was a motion, was it, Councillor Feeney? And
Yes.
Councillor Carver seconds it, and I'm happy to note that I'm just looking for Ms. Okay. One letter was addressed to the mayor and one letter is addressed to town hall, and I would volunteer to sign both to go back to these students from our school. We're always interested to hear from them. Okay, all in favor
I
on
have a
that
question.
motion?
Before we
Okay.
vote,
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I mean, it's great to acknowledge them, but they have raised some questions about two key components. Are we planning to respond to those concerns in a particular way, or it's just saying, yes, we've heard you and we're moving on?
CAO, would you care to respond?
Well, I guess, so I can acknowledge that both of these speak to town assets. But some of them are more straightforward than others. So as far as the potholes, and certainly I think we always like to hear people pointing out where those need attention. I've always loved the City of Halifax did a project at one point with a GIS map where people could plot the potholes that they saw around the city. It's actually always desired to get reports about those kind of things. We do cold patching in the winter, which, as everyone knows, doesn't last as long as it ought.
Absolutely.
So, but we are always working on it. We do always want to get the reports about potholes. As far as the other one had a number of different suggestions. Some of them I'm not sure I can respond to. Fairmont Street sidewalk, though, growing up there, I don't think it's been done since I grew up there. So it definitely is on the list. But council always has to evaluate those different capital priorities in the budget. So I'm sure when we're going through the budget and, I think there's some sidewalks listed, we'll have a good opportunity to talk about where limited resources could best be used and keep that in mind. Yeah, so that's just some commentary on what was raised.
Councillor Burdick?
Yes, I think these are good things. I did want to say that I know because Mr. Uden is, and possibly Ms. Cole are in the same class as my son, that they're probably watching right now. So I'm just saying hello to them, and that these are things that have come up before council too. So I want to reassure them that it's on our minds, all of this stuff.
And to go back to the deputy mayor's comment, issues like potholes and the condition of street, the conditions of sidewalks are always on the agenda for council. Certainly part of our budget discussions, which take place in the spring. And for the soccer field, in particular to Ms. Cole's concerns that there is no plan at this time to build any apartment buildings on the soccer field. So I think we could include that message to them when we write back to them.
I think that would be great.
CIO?
I don't want to cut off the deputy mayor. I was just going to say we should know Plan Mahone Bay is still ongoing. And so it would be awesome if the folks in this class and others are taking an interest. There will be plenty of opportunities to give feedback about things like the soccer field to that process, and it would be great if we make them aware of that opportunity as well. Sorry, Francis, didn't mean to step on you there.
No, perfectly okay. I think what I wanted to just put across is it's having been youth not so long ago. It's always helpful when it's not just yes, we've heard you and we're moving on, but there's a little bit more detail on sort of what your thoughts are going forward. So I appreciated that something will be of some substance going to them.
Okay. So a motion in general on the correspondence information items. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I just had one other question on item
Oh, yes.
5.4, the letter from the Honorable Chuck Porter, Minister of the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and who refers to the $43,000 that the town has received. And I just wanted to hear again how that money was.
So I'm happy to answer that question, but the clerk's had her hand up since before you started talking, so I assume it's not about this question. Maureen?
Just to point out that I have a motion on the floor, but I don't have a record of a vote. The motion that council directs staff to prepare correspondence to Mr. Uden and Ms. Cole, thanking them for their correspondence and for sharing their opinions with the town.
And we had a lot of discussion on that. You're absolutely right, Deputy Clerk. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any other comments on the motion? On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried.
I'm
Now,
sorry if I jumped the gun on that. I thought that the mayor was asking for the receive and file motion.
So Councillor Carver, I do remember your question, so I'm happy to address it now. I'm just going to put that piece of correspondence up on the screen. So the Safe Restart funds, which were announced by the federal government back in the summer, did eventually get approved. There was an effort made, I guess you could say, back in April to collect information from the municipalities around projections for revenue loss or costs in association with COVID. It's our understanding that that was generally taken into account in the distribution of funds, which do end up being largely proportional to population, with the exception that units that had transit systems did receive more, typically having to do with lost revenue from transit operations, which, that was one of the stated intentions here. So this money was distributed back in November. At the time, it just appeared in our bank account. We didn't have any clarity around what it was going to be for, but we had an understanding that there would be some more instruction to follow. So this letter specifies the criteria under which the town can use the money having to do with COVID. We have looked at these categories. There's been some follow-up, a session with the feds where they were doing a little bit more, or with the province rather, where they were doing a little more explanation. So we reported back in November that it was our expectation that this money would be used for number 2 on this list here by the town. So we don't have, as you know, a significant loss of revenue, just owing to the kind of operations that we have. We haven't had a significant loss of revenue, excepting in some of the utility operations, but that's not eligible for this funding. So number 2 here is to continue to implement social distancing and infection prevention and control protocols required to operate facilities, public spaces, and effectively deliver services to citizens. So we've had some increased costs. Obviously, we have additional having to do with preparing our offices to reopen, and there will likely be some carryover into the next fiscal year. So we're just still assessing what eligible costs we have, but the expectation is, as reported back in November, this would be going predominantly to number 2 there, having to do with renovation of spaces, and then we don't have transit operations. There is some acquisition of PPE that has happened throughout the year, so we may be attributing that to this fund to just see where we need to move it around.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Can we have a motion on the information items, please? Councillor Carver.
I'll make a motion to receive and file items 5.1 to 5.6. And well, that includes the 2 letters.
Okay. Councillor Burdick.
Just a note, if I made, about item 5.5 about the Order of Nova Scotia, there is a little bit of a request in there that information be disseminated about nominations, I believe, and the date being March 19th that the nominations end. So if that is something that we want to have on our Facebook pages, etc. Something to consider.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. Your second the motion. Thank you. Is Council ready for the question? On the motion, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to staff reports. 6.1, the staff report. CAO, you will respond to questions, I presume?
As usual, and yes, it's the staff report, it's the big staff report, but I'll note, just as I always do, this is the first meeting of the month, so only the council assignments to staff, the very first section on the first sheet is updated. The rest of it is still here, and people may have questions concerning any of the documents, so I'll put it up as needed.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions from the staff report for the CAO?
Well, that's okay too.
Good news.
Mayor,
Councillor Carver.
yes, I did have a question that I floated yesterday, which was about an item that's missing from the staff report, which is the Pro Kids item, and that we had been reaching out to Modal to ask for their support in considering including Mahone Bay in the Pro Kids funding. And is it right, CAO, that we haven't heard back from Modal on that question?
Yeah, I can confirm the reason it's off the list there is that back in November, after confirmation of their new council, but having the same mayor, we wrote to Mayor Getson and council, and essentially, or Mayor Oliver Getson and council, and provided council with a report on that at your next meeting that said, you know, yes, this has been completed and a letter's been sent, and have not had any response to that letter to date. So that's why it's not appearing on the report anymore. And I'm not sure at what point council would think to follow up, but we're not tracking MODL to determine when it does appear on one of their agendas. So.
Councillor Burdick.
I did have a question about point 14 in the budget operating initiatives there, which is about the climate adaptation initiative. and the 3D model and project with Coastal Action, and just wondering when the next update on that progress might be. If there's been any indication from them.
Yeah, I think there's a project team meeting coming up shortly because there's been a doodle put out for it. So hopefully I'll have some more information from that project team meeting. That's basically Coastal Action as a team, including Dalhousie and CBCL and others, and the town is on there just to get included as one of the stakeholders and as a participant in the project. So usually I have an update coming out of those. I'll hopefully have an update for council. And then the expectation originally in terms of the timeline is to have an update on the 3D model that would be something that, you know, would be potentially available for public by early spring. So that's sort of the timeline as far as that goes.
Thanks.
Other comments, Councillor Carver?
Yeah, please excuse me for being dogged about this, but I don't understand how things work between municipalities when we're making a request like that. So how is that tracked or followed up in terms of crossing our fingers that that request has not fallen through the cracks somewhere about the Pro Kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't think we've ever had a formal way to track if our letters get a response. So we might need to start having a list of letters for which, you know, a response was anticipated, and then if it hasn't come in, then we know that. So that's something to think about. I know, Maureen, you kind of handle the council correspondence, so maybe something to think about, but I'm not really sure. You know, traditionally, I don't think there's any formal tracking of letters to make sure they get responded to. And at the end of the day, obviously it's not our it's out of our control whether they do or not, but we could send a follow-up after some amount of time.
It seems to me like it might be a good idea to do some kind of follow-up just so it doesn't get lost. It's because we've been at this for almost 2 years, actually, the request for Modal to support that.
I guess all I can suggest formally is that, you know, council could write another letter. I can check in just with Alex or something, I guess. It's, you know, it's a little tricky to keep tabs on all these kind of things that are out there, but yeah, we can see what they have to say. I guess the other option is look at their agendas, look at their meeting record. You know, I mean, if it was correspondence to us, it would be supposed to come up at the next meeting. So,
Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, just, you know, to take up on the theme. So really the theme of that support is that we want to provide a modest appropriation to have any citizen of Mahone Bay be able to take advantage of that program. And that because all of the infrastructure is in other municipalities, hockey rinks, you know, soccer fields, and it's just that we don't necessarily, we're not the keepers of the program, but we want to make sure that if there are any citizens of the community that would also like to participate, like we'll play our fair. The theme was we're happy to play our role financially. I mean, I think we were talking about a $500-600 appropriation 2 years ago when Councillor O'Neill at the time made the original motion. We just can't find anybody to. All we want to do is play along. We're happy to pay our own way, but please invite us to the dance.
Okay. So, Councillor Carver, do you have a resolution to your dilemma?
I have a
Yes, I
question,
understand
Mayor,
that staff is
Councillor
going to try and track it, and I see that the deputy mayor has his hand up.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I'm just trying to figure out. So my assumption had been all along that Mahone Bay residents and kids in Mahone Bay can apply to that fund. Is the case that they cannot apply? Or okay.
No.
I just want to provide some
Funding was
clarity
offered to the
around
Pro
that.
Kids Group, was it not?
So my understanding, and I would hate to upset the boat for anyone who's benefited from this arrangement. My understanding is that informally, people who applied to Leo's program and put their place of residence as Mahone Bay have not always been rejected. that they have sometimes found ways to accommodate those applicants. And it was partially in consideration of that that the council wanted to acknowledge that and, you know, make a formal effort to say, well, how about we give some contribution of funds and MODL continues to administer the program, but we can actually say to town residents that they're welcome to apply to MODL's program, rather than creating a separately administered program. So it's essentially respecting what's happening now. And I don't want to rock the boat by saying that no one in Mahone Bay ever benefits under this program. I do think that an effort has been made. And that's actually to recognize that effort. My understanding was 2 years ago that council wanted to reach out to MODL in this regard.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Any conversation, are there any conversations that have been had other than the letter being sent between staff? So thinking rather than, I mean, a letter is official, but I know that things can move much faster without letters sometimes.
There were a lot of conversations the first time around. It did go originally at the staff level. Back when Trudy was there as Director of Recreation, she was heading that up. At some point, the proposal got a bit misconstrued, and so MODL essentially said, you know, if Mahone Bay is looking to hire us to administer a separate program for the town of Mahone Bay, here's an hourly rate under which we could do that. And that was absolutely not what was intended. So I think the thought was, we discussed at council, that perhaps this needs to be restarted with a council request that actually, you know, is quite specific as to the fact that we're looking to have our residents under the MODL program as opposed to starting a new program, and maybe restart because the staff who had worked on it weren't there anymore. So I think that, you know, discussions have been had, but I think staff over there need to be given direction to really engage with us on it. I mean, they have a full plate as well. So I think at this point, if their council isn't interested in telling the staff to to do it, then I don't really think I should restart the conversation again at the staff level. So I do think council did the right thing by putting it through the official channel, at least to start with. But yeah, I'm not sure about the lack of response. I was just looking back on their agenda in December. I don't know. It's about all I can think of, but informally, hopefully we'll have a chance to inquire.
Are we aware of any situations where a resident from Mahone Bay have been declined or refused participation in a modal recreation program?
I'm hoping not to be speaking on hearsay, but I did understand that was one reason why Councillor O'Neill made the motion in the first place. But
nothing recently.
No, it's a confusing situation. I'm now very confused. But if we can be assured that Mahone Bay kids are eligible for the Pro Kids program, that's the goal we want to achieve.
Councillor Feeney?
Yeah, this is just a good idea. It's logical, and I'm sure everyone will support moving along. It's just, it hasn't risen to the priority list high enough to get actioned. So I think we should recraft the letter, and just acknowledge the busy people, staff changes that got lost between the cracks, and re-engage and let them know that let them know our intentions.
We're still interested.
Sure. And I think, I think that it was a terrific idea 2 years ago, and it's still a terrific idea today.
The CAO, would you like a motion to that effect to have staff draft a letter to the Recreation Department in Modal to ask for an update of the Pro Kids proposal?
Well, I think the letter that was sent is the right thing to do in terms of official correspondence, but you could have a motion that staff reach out to MODL for an update on the status of the letter that we sent. I don't think that's inappropriate.
Okay,
So move.
so moved. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds. Okay, are we ready for the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. So we maybe can expect to see that in the next program update, or certainly the one following that, CAO?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see on this list of tasks assigned what you guys just moved by motion, and the next to it, probably a note that says that I sent an email to Alex. From there,
Okay.
we can't do anything else to get an answer, but hopefully we'll have an answer.
That'll do it. Anything else for the CAO on the report? No, nothing. Entertain a motion to accept the report as presented. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Now. Any further discussion on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the next inserted item 6.6, the town logo review. CAO, would you like to walk us through your report?
Yeah, I can. So we do have a little bit of background information here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but essentially explains the history of the town's consideration of our sort of overall style, font, presentation, report covers, all that kind of stuff, up to and including recommendation from SkySail Brand Marketing and Design for new logo in the fall of 2019, which was approved by council. Subsequently, some concerns were raised, and this report essentially provides council with, as directed by motion last fall, some context for consideration of those concerns in respect of the engagement processes that have been going on over the past year, and also an accessibility review that was undertaken. As we move to the implementation of the Accessibility Act, it's important to have these kind of reviews periodically at our disposal. So we did engage an expert who's been referred to us by the province from Access Changes Everything. They were engaged by the province to provide municipalities with coaching on digital accessibility. So we turned back to them for a review and presents a motion recommendation having to do with that review for council's consideration. So I can put that up on the screen, but wonder if there's discussion, and I don't want to make it hard for everybody to see. So.
Okay. There is a recommendation from staff included in your package.
And that's it up on the screen there now, but I can take it back down if it gets confusing with hands up or anything. So.
Okay. CAO, can you give us a bit of information on the items that are attached for council review? Is there anything in particular that you feel is critical to this discussion?
Well, these items provide the background, so how we got to the current logo, considerations in its adoption. As I said, the council passed a motion last April directing the completion of certain projects before we would discuss this subject. So there's also presented the work of the wayfinding signage project, which essentially clarifies, as was noted back in the adoption of this current logo, that it would not be used for tourism branding, that the town was working with the chamber to ensure tourism was directed towards the chamber. And that we consistently with that, we've used the chamber's color scheme, website, etc., with respect to the wayfinding signage. And the other item there is the report on the Plan Mahone Bay, and that's essentially presented because that has been an active engagement process with many members of the community, intended to develop as a starting point for the plan review a vision, and that vision can be contrasted with the logo in the event that is valuable context for council's consideration. But again, at the end, the report actually just presents a recommendation from the accessibility review.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions from council? Deputy Mayor?
Just trying to get a bit of clarity when reading the report and basically how we got to a place where we determined we needed a new logo. And it's not very clear to me how we determined that, other than, and maybe it's just me in the way I'm understanding it. It was the recommendation of SkySail that the logo changes, or was it that the previous logo had problems, significant problems that we felt needed change?
CAO?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both of those things. There were issues that were identified with the previous logo that necessitated looking at the logo as part of our overall communication strategy. So the previous logo, I think everyone knows, the town didn't hold copyright on the logo. It was actually developed by the Chamber of Commerce. It still is the logo used by the Chamber of Commerce. So there was a lack of clarity around our ability to use, reproduce, and own and restrict the use of that logo, which is, it's very important for a municipality to be able to clearly identify official communications materials. So that was a key factor. There were also considerations around the digitization, accessibility, and scaling of the previous logo. So for a number of reasons presented by SkySail, they recommended the logo that we currently have, that council adopted at that time. I think I included SkySail's letter of recommendation in the report. So I don't know if that helps provide some context for the impetus for the change back in 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I read all 61 pages of that because it's a new topic to me. I know there's been a huge controversy over the last year or so, but I have two questions. The first is, what does that recommendation mean? Because I read it and I have no idea what it actually means. And second question is, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep the logo or abandon it? Because that's the real question.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I think you were waiting next, and then Councillor Burdick. You're on mute, Deputy Mayor.
So sorry about that. The two issues that have been raised with the logo. One, the fact that it's not the towns, it's a chamber's logo. For me, there's a cure there in going back to the chamber and ascertaining whether or not they allow us to. And it seems funny because the town's been using it for quite a while, but just ascertaining that the chamber will allow that. And then the second piece was their consideration of just taking the logo as it is and going to a designer to reproduce it to make sure that it does do the things that you need it to do going forward, rather than coming up with a new logo. And the reason I'm asking that is changing a logo changes, like we've seen, there's a lot of fomenting, displeasure at changing something that people hold dear to themselves. So I'm wondering, for me, there sort of seems to have been a leap of this doesn't work, so let's just get rid of it rather than cure what the problem was at that time.
Okay, Councillor Burdick?
I was just going to say if the CAO had his hand up if he wanted to respond to, or should I go ahead?
Sure, the chair is recognizing you, Councillor, and then we'll go to the CAO.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Mayor. It does seem, because it has been such a topic of debate, I would say, in the public realm, that I'm not sure. I did look at the documents and I couldn't see if a similar thing that had happened with the Tabiner example, which was to have these different possibilities shown to the public that they could, have their say on. It seems like that might be a good consideration if there is going to be further public engagement on this, which seems like maybe a good idea. Also, that could be a consideration there. Similarly to the other community engagement plans that have been happening with other items like the bicycle path, etc.
Okay, CAO?
Yeah, I just wanted to address the Deputy Mayor's suggestion of an easy fix sharing the logo with the chamber. So that, I mean, that's just simply not a possibility, regardless of whether they were interested. We're not the same organization. So when we put out a communication and they put out a communication, they do need to be distinguishable, especially as a level of government. We can't share our logo with another organization. So, I mean, that's just simply, the reason why that's not a possibility. It's not impossible to have a logo that looks different from the current logo. And honestly, my understanding of the discussion that's going around here is that perhaps residents would like to consider different options for the appearance of the town's logo. I really would suggest the town council is better served by discussing that rather than deconstructing previous logos that the town has used. We've used a number. The previous one that you guys are referring to that belonged to the chamber, it wasn't adopted by virtue of a public process. It was in use by the town for about 5 years and did not come in by virtue of a public process. So, at this point, if the council's inclined to develop a public process around the creation or consideration of logos, I would just suggest that you be forward-looking in that. And perhaps if that's the intention, we have time to consider what the impact would be in the budget process to actually have a designer and go through that process. If that is council's intention, again, that's not staff's recommendation. We have a logo which serves our purposes currently.
Councillor Now.
Yes, I do believe that I was on the previous council when this was passed. I think we really were remiss in the way we handled it with the public input. And I think we should be going back out and getting that public input now. And I know there were a couple of different suggestions at that time before this logo was actually chosen. And I know my personal preference was similar to what we have now, but having the 3 churches there instead of the diamonds. That's for a public process, but I think really we should take some of those proposals and maybe go out to the public and see what their reaction is.
Okay. Councillor Feeney.
So Mayor, I think the issue on this evening's agenda is specifically alterations to the existing approved and authorized logo to allow staff to continue to make it compliant with the new accessibility rules. And so I think that's a worthwhile exercise to move along this evening. As it relates to like the ongoing and future use of the existing 3 triangle logo, I mean, if it's, the will of council to, review that as a going and the use of that logo going forward, and going through the process of having an RFP issued and a designer hired and review and get new logos for evaluation, probably a year from now or so, we would have some alternatives to evaluate and review if we thought that was a good use of our time and a good use of taxpayers' money. But as it relates to this evening and the item on the agenda for tonight, like I would like to have the logo, the existing approved and authorized logo amended to reflect the current thinking as it relates to the accessibility issues. And then if there's an item that comes up at a future council meeting talking about moving forward with an incremental brand new start from scratch RFP as it relates to a future logo, like I'd be happy to be open-minded at that future meeting. So I think I would move forward. I would move the recommendation forward for this evening, which is specifically to make the modifications that the CAO mentions in tonight's document to improve it from an accessibility perspective.
Okay. Is that a motion, Councillor Feeney?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So is
Second
it
that.
seconded
second the
by
motion.
Councillor Carver? Deputy Mayor, you had to comment?
I know we want to move it forward, and I guess if we get to voting, I'm quite okay with doing that. But I don't think that's wholly why the reason came to council. I don't think that the issue of the logo is just for that accessibility purposes. One of the reasons why it's on the table is because some members of the community are not very happy with where we're at, and so rather than keep bringing it back and forth, the issue needs a cure, and and we don't need to shy away from it. So I'm surprised that I didn't know this. I thought I didn't realize that there were other I guess designs that included what the community wanted, that probably we can take and put back to the community and ask them, so which ones of these, similar to the way of finding peace, which ones of these would you rather, as opposed to the one that we have now? I think if those are present, we don't need to spend any more money. We have them, we can send them to the community.
Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, as a point of clarification, just so everybody's on the same page, we have an approved, authorized, and sanctioned logo.
Mhm.
Not everyone loves it, and a lot of people hate it, but it is approved, sanctioned, and authorized, and it's in use, albeit only for about a year. If there's a move forward to change the logo, fair enough, but the way to have that conversation is to introduce that as a motion and move that along, move that agenda forward, and see if you can get a majority of the council to move that along. So if I'll be frank, I'm open-minded on the topic, but I do know that we do have an already approved decision, and if we want to relitigate that again, fair enough down the road, but I don't believe that item is on the agenda tonight. It may be on a future. It may be on a future. Right, it may be on a future agenda, but I don't think that's on tonight's agenda.
Okay. I think that was the point that the CAO was making as well in response to the deputy mayor, that having a reconsideration, or rather drafting a new RFP to develop 2 or 3 choices of logo with the input of the public, is something that can happen. But for now, we have the current logo, and it's an accessibility issue. CAO?
And just for clarity, I mean, after the motion that's currently on the table, obviously, it wouldn't be out of order for somebody to move tonight that staff investigate the costs of a process to develop logos for public consideration, and that be part of our budget discussion. I mean, that's where that would normally come up. The ball's got to get rolling somewhere if council's inclined.
Agreed.
Having the cost to do it, it's going to be similar to wayfinding. We can come back with that, and council can discuss that.
Councillor Wilson. And then Councillor Burdick, and then the deputy mayor.
If Councillor Feeney was prepared to make that motion, I would be prepared to second it, to adopt the recommendations of the CAO as per the report. And I would like to suggest that, absent compelling reasons otherwise, we should move along with other stuff, because if someone wants to bring up revisiting the whole logo business at a future date, then they should see how they make out with votes on council. But I think we're really spinning our tires here.
Okay, Councillor Burdick. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I think because there is new business, the possibility of new business still, or would that have had to been done earlier in the meeting? Because it is, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Just hang on. Keep going, Councillor Burdick.
I was going to say I would make that suggestion to propose that this be a motion be put forward maybe at the next meeting, to put this towards the public for public engagement on previous iterations as well as the present one.
Once we're finished with this motion, you could give us a notice of motion under new business for the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Feeney, your motion is still on the floor. Councillor Wilson is seconding. Deputy Mayor, you have your hand up. So hold on. What's the matter, Councillor Carver?
Oh, I had seconded the motion some time ago, but that's
I
okay.
apologize. Councillor Carver beat you to it, Councillor Wilson. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so and the reason why maybe I have a different view on this is, so there's a resident who wrote to council, and the CEO responded and mentioned that the report will come to council to be discussed today. And so in the discussion, we are not discussing the concerns that the resident raised. We are talking about accessibility. So that's very different from I guess, the communication that's gone out to this member of public. So I'm a little bit confused by that. And that's why, for me, I think maybe we're at different places on thinking about this. I'm quite comfortable if we can revisit it later, because I think it's something that needs a discussion and some way forward if we commit to doing that.
CAO?
Yeah, not to prolong too much, but just two quick notes about the history for Deputy Mayor and anybody else who wasn't around for that conversation. There were references to other designs that were raised in that process. So SkySail did produce a number of different alternative designs, which council did receive and consider. We're not really in a position to take those designs back out unless we go back to SkySail to support that process. So I think, as was noted by a number of folks here, and maybe Councillor Burdick, if you're thinking about wording for a notice of motion, part of the suggestion to have staff, look at the cost of that process would be to get another designer like Pierre Taverner, like SkySail. Could be either of them, could be another. But we'd have to, in accordance with our procurement practice, we'd have to go out to the market and get someone to do that work. So if we have that cost, that could be something for council to consider in the budget process. So that was that note in that respect. And just to the point about why we're talking about accessibility, I didn't go back and include all of the letters that came to council over the time where people were raising concerns and considerations around the logo. But there were essentially, as I can recall, two big things that were raised: accessibility considerations, which have been investigated, and aesthetic considerations, which ultimately council will have to weigh themselves. I can't really evaluate the aesthetic considerations. So some people don't like the new logo. I think Councillor Feedy, pointed out there's some people who really hate the new logo, but that is the logo. And in order to determine what logos people would like better, we'd have to go through the process of creating some new logos and having them put out for public consideration. And if that's something some members would like to consider, I think Councillor Burdick might have a notice of motion that we get that going. But I also, as I've noted, I don't recommend that, because staff evaluated the logo on the basis of its use by the town, and it currently serves our purposes with these accessibility modifications that are currently under consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver?
Tonight was essentially advertised in a couple of different ways as an opportunity for council to formally revisit its commitment to the use of the current Three Diamonds design as the corporate logo. And as the Deputy Mayor said, I think that was a message that was expected by at least some members of the public. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit inarticulate on this because I'm having a hard time saying what's on my mind. I'm also resonating with what Councillor Wilson said about just moving on. We've got a lot, as a council, we have a huge amount on our plate, and staff have a huge amount on their plates. Much as I opposed this design in the first place, I've come to get used to it. It's familiar now. It works. I don't dislike it anymore. I'm not prepared to sacrifice the good for the perfect. In my mind now, it's good enough. It works. And as Councillor Wilson said, I just sort of would like to move on and not get caught in the weeds again. We're not going to make everybody happy. Some people like it. Some people have told us they don't. We have to decide. We do, not that's our job. So I'm just saying, I used to really dislike it, and now I don't really dislike it anymore.
Okay, Councillor Burdick, you have a comment?
I do. And I don't want us to get caught in the weeds either. But I'm also, things are turning also, it has come up for discussion so many times that yes, council made a decision at a previous time about this, but possibly even another alternative way of addressing it would be a plebiscite or some sort of way to say to the people, what do you think of this? Just a simple thing, a simple poll, perhaps, that can be, disseminated in that way. What do you think right now? Do you want a different logo than this one? Because that would be as direct as it can be, public response within a certain amount of numbers for whoever within the town. I would suggest that also, that it would be town members it would be restricted to town members, to their response.
Absolutely. Thank you. CAO?
Oh, just on the logistics.
We've got a motion on the floor, so let's go ahead, CAO.
I just wanted to say on the logistics of that, being aware that participation would likely be quite short of what would be necessary to constitute a plebiscite. So typically this kind of thing gets a level of interest in the community. And just if council were to understand that when we put out a survey, will likely generate, some number of responses far short of that needed to be conclusive, just for perspective in terms of, I wouldn't call that a plebiscite, but we could do surveys, which we can. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Carver.
Are we still on Councillor Feeney's motion, the one that I seconded?
We are indeed. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to make one more comment, which actually it's not even on the motion, so I won't make the comment, but I might make it after the vote's taken, if I may.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion, seconded. The motion that council directs staff to act on actionable items from the accessibility review of the town logo. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion is carried.
So Mayor, if I may, it's just about the logo again, and because there has been so much passion about the idea of going back to the Three Churches logo, for all the reasons that we've heard, I just don't think that logo is possible for us to use. But one of the things that really persuaded me about the Three Churches logo is having heard from Tina Henniger with Dow Lunenburg County when they were traveling out west with the little bowler that was decorated with the then town logo of the Three Churches. And she was asked if she was from some kind of religious cult, because they're churches, they're Christian churches. And what does that say about inclusiveness? It's a serious question, because we're trying to be an inclusive community. So I just wanted to put that out as something for everyone to think about in this
That's a
discussion.
good point, Councillor Carver. Okay. We're done? 6.6?
The Deputy
Deputy
Mayor.
I just wanted to say, in terms of the way this particular issue was communicated to the public, I think just portrays our challenges around how the expectation we build with community. It could have been very clear that we've already made a decision and the public knows and understands that. So just going forward, communication needs to be slightly clear rather than create expectation that as council now we are revisiting a process. So I'm just putting it out there that we can communicate better. The way in which community was anticipating this conversation is not the way we've conducted it. Just putting it out there.
Thank you. I think that whole exercise, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole exercise of the logo did impact how our engagement policy now provides for the opportunity for citizens to be involved in those kinds of processes. And I know there's some issues on the agenda tonight where staff have even included the potential engagement plan as to how and when, with whom, and in fact, who will be invited to participate, if that's the right word. So the positive result of the logo situation, particularly for those people who do not find resolution in it, is that it did have a positive impact on how we consult with the public. And our new engagement policy, which came out shortly after, it came out in the late spring, I think, CAO, yeah, is one of those things that came about from that. Okay, thank you. A tough one. Let's go to 6.2 community-wide bicycle engagement plan. CAO or deputy clerk? Who's going to step up to the
it's
mic?
still on me for this one. So as you noted, Mr. Mayor, we now have a template where we're presenting these engagement plans. There were a number of different items on the list from council where consultation was anticipated. We were charged to come back to council with this engagement plan. As council knows, we have since become aware that we've been unsuccessful in our funding for Connect 2 program, active transportation safety upgrades. Council has directed staff to proceed with the engineering designs around most of those proposed improvements. That would be the one-way street on Cherry Lane, the crossings on Main and Edgewater, the three-way stop as directed at Clearway and Main Street. So those items are moving forward, but in association with those items has always been, since Bicycle Nova Scotia project 2 years ago, since the transportation planning review process last year, there's always been an understanding that we were supporting active transportation choices, including cycling choices, and contributing to the development of an all ages accessible cycling route through the community. But that conversation has been largely with identified stakeholders, experts, engineers, has not included a significant public component. So in lieu of funding, we have some time to go out and engage with the community and hopefully strengthen any future funding application as per the feedback from Department of Energy, who oversee this program, which they did tell us that they would like to see the connection between infrastructure upgrades and a multi-year plan or commitment to the eventual, goal of that work.
Okay.
And so these
Councillor
are presented for approval. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, CAO.
Mayor, as you know, this was on our agenda for last meeting, and I asked for it to be deferred until this meeting, and council concurred to give us a little bit of time to spend with it. Last meeting, if you recall, was a real record breaker as far as length, so it's nice to have just a few brief minutes to talk about this. After the Blue Route and the Bicycle Nova Scotia team and that they made presentations to council, there was I think a lot of positive feedback by that impressive document and plan that they provided, which really talked about improved safety for youth who were recycling, linking the two ends of town through corridors that children could bicycle safely through, and having a bunch of traffic calming features, and a really a pretty all-inclusive change of Clearway. And all of those projects are more aspirational, but some of the projects we had consolidated with the transportation initiative, of which we put in our priorities and we haven't received any funding. So I think what I'd like to make sure we do with regard to the engagement plan is to be able to communicate back to the town that we haven't just put that package on a shelf and forgotten about it. I really do believe some of those projects were incredible and would really improve the community. Specifically, the linking between Main Street and Kimburn Street through a bike corridor through the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission property. I think that's an amazing project. And there were others as well. So one thing I'd like to make sure we do is we just keep those things top of mind by maybe we have to circulate the package a little more. Maybe we should invite Bicycle Nova Scotia back again to provide a presentation again so just that we don't forget about that, tremendous package. It's been 2 years, and I think the lack of funding can't stop us from keeping it on the priority list. So thanks for a few minutes to talk about that again. I would really like to see a couple of those investments happen. And maybe it'll take time for us to make them happen, but they'll never happen if they're not at least on our priority list.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? CAO?
Oh, just quickly in support of Councillor Feeney's. So, Joe, I felt the same way, that we've done a lot of work and people may not be that aware of it. So in this engagement plan, just to call everyone's attention to it, it essentially prescribes phase 1 and phase 2 engagement. And that's in acknowledgement as well of the limited amount of time that we have before budget. So rather than trying to get out there and fully construct a project with public engagement before budget, what we're going to proposing to do is as phase 1, share what we have done, share the plans we have developed, and get the public to be more aware of that, and then take our time into the summer to develop a new project concept, with the understanding that, as you say, it may not be moving forward immediately. And to Deputy Mayor's comments about our last discussion, the last thing we want to do is give people expectations that something is going to happen when it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Anyone else? When I look at the engagement tools, in order for council to be determinate when looking at the plan, is it possible to slim down the list? I mean, it's like digital engagement, webinars, message boards, discussion forum, online polls and surveys, submissions, email feedback, mail-in surveys, polls, workbooks. It's like every kind of engagement option you can think of, as opposed to having a little more specific plan as to what we're going to use to capture what groups of stakeholders. And I believe the stakeholders should only be either citizens of the town or professionals in the business who would be providing advice. CAO?
Oh, just it wasn't on the comment about stakeholders. That's, we can certainly, people may want to respond to that, but just on the point about the list, exhaustive lists of different engagement tools. So what this template is taking the language directly into the town's policy. So the policy provides these exhaustive lists because those are all the tools that we would ever use. And the bolded sections here are essentially used as headings. So underneath that where it says notes, that's the notes are the thing that actually would be happening on this particular engagement. And I think that may be just a note where we could change the presentation of this template a little bit if that's not completely clear. So I just wanted to make it clear to everybody. So when what we're doing with the template here, it's up on the screen now, the X's that go in here, every engagement plan that you're presented with has the same text in bold. And then if there is an X, that means there's a note here. And the note says of what is above, which is always there, what are we actually prescribing in this engagement plan? So that it is a little bit of a run-on heading, but we just use the language that came out of the policy. So maybe it's just a presentation thing. We are specifically prescribing a bit of a tighter, limited number of tools than the full list in the bold.
And on the issue of stakeholders?
So I guess I can say why the stakeholders that are identified were identified there. And so to your point, we've got some that are not residents, for example, operators of tourism businesses were cited. I'm just flipping up here to trail operators and organizations. And it's essentially because when you talk about the possible beneficiaries of this type of active transportation improvement, it's regularly stressed by the province that it is an economic development initiative, which is of benefit to local business, of interest to tourism operators. I don't want to single anyone out, but in our wayfinding signage project with the chamber, we have a couple of representatives of the chamber, and we were talking about trail signage, and it's been regularly pointed out through that process that businesses do want to see folks from entering town from the trails, having access to their businesses, see those interconnections. So that was sort of why that thinking there, but it's certainly council's prerogative if identification of stakeholders needs to be more specifically pointing out that not everyone has a stake in paying for the project. I completely understand where you're coming from on that one. And with respect to the trail organizations, they might have a stake in paying for the project, because we should acknowledge that they do maintain the trail within the town limits. They do actually put direct capital into that, not the town.
Okay. Anyone? Okay. So this, the motion, CAO, you would like?
So in any case where we do a motion, present an engagement plan, the recommendation would be the council approve the engagement plan as presented. But as you know, in any of these, if council wants to make an amendment to what's been presented, you can do as amended and then just note the amendment, or direct staff to come back with a more complete amendment if a lot of work is needed.
But it's only the engagement plan that council is considering.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can we get a motion? Councillor Wilson,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councillor Feeney. Council ready for the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the bylaw annual report, 6.3.
All right, so this is a new thing because we haven't had bylaw enforcement services on a regular basis before. So we've done an attempt working with Al to present a report of what he's been doing through the year. And it's for public purposes, obviously, but if council has any questions or even thoughts for areas for improvement, it's a new report. Happy to take those now or directly. If you want to send a note about the presentation of it, you can do that.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick.
It was very interesting to see this report and the details in there, and some kind of shocking things like the occasion where an upset motorist backed up their car. I was wondering if there'd been any follow-up or resolution of that with the RCMP.
I don't believe there was anything else that we could comment on. Clerk, did you have anything else you can, or did you just want to say what I said?
Say that we have followed, we've followed the process through, but no, there's nothing more to report. Sorry.
Thank you.
Same thing.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
The staff reaction to that question sort of leads to another question, which is I wonder if you can help give council some guidelines about what's permissible to talk about or not in terms of the bylaw enforcement reports. What's legitimate for us to ask about, or what's legitimate for staff to tell us about?
It's a public report, so you can ask about anything that's been presented. We'll have to draw the line on what we can comment about. So you can send the questions by email, or if you ask them now, then I might say that we'd send the response by email, but that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment? Can we get a motion on the bylaw annual report, Deputy Mayor?
Just curious about, so going a little bit back, there was an issue about off-leash dogs, and I was expecting to see there might be something. I know I guess it's might have been this year, not last year, but were there no issues about off-leash dogs in the last year? That it's only.
Yeah, think if you don't mind my jumping in to respond to that, Mr. Mayor, we did have we queried our bylaw control, animal control about reports last year when this came up, and we hadn't had any significant number of reports. Now, that being said, the animal control and bylaw enforcement are two separate entities because we do contract for animal control. So we have included some statistics on the regular report to council, where throughout the year we will provide some additional updates. So I think the most recent one in January 28th did note that there are some patrols going on with respect to dog enforcement right now on the trails. But that would be continue to be updated on those reports to council going forward. So it is the annual cutoff is in part to blame for that.
Okay, thank you. There's a report from our dog catcher, I think, or an article in the current mayor's newsletter, is there not, clerk? And are we still planning to have a stronger education program on the whole dog bylaw, dog restraint piece?
We are, your worship, and I apologize. I just moved around my home office the other day and I can't find the rack card, but we have developed educational material that is for the bylaw officer who will be doing those walks around town and, hey, just remember everybody, great to see your dog on leash, or, you know, that kind of thing to get the word out there. As you said, you've noticed the first article in the newsletter. There's more to come. We're still keeping up that presence on social media. So it is, we are still near the beginning of the process, but yes, it's definitely ongoing.
Thank you. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, just one quick question. Are the fines that are administered by the bylaw officer, are those set by council, or are those based on provincial regulations?
I don't know, Mo, whether you want to take this or I can. We have a variety of different levels at which we've set those fines depending on the bylaw in question. In order to be valid, I guess, in order to not have to be handled in small claims court on a one-by-one basis, they do need to be registered with the province, with Department of Justice. So we do have a schedule. It's a public schedule. It's part of the 300 or so pages of schedules if you flip through to find Town of Mahone Bay on their website, which does list all of the fines that we've registered for all of our different bylaws. Over the years, I don't believe that those fines, they're not all set in the bylaw. I don't believe that those fines were necessarily approved in council. I really don't have exactly when or how all of them were done. Some of them are coming directly out of bylaws. Other times the bylaw sets a range, and within that range, we have an approved amount on the schedule. Maureen's been around a little longer than me, so she may have more of a memory about when some of those ones were approved if we did go through that at an open session. But it may just be, you know, if it says less than 1,000, then at some point we said 411.65. I don't know how we got there.
So Mayor, just I guess to the deputy mayor's point on, you know, topics of the day, off leash dog walking, for example. I mean, if there would be an opinion potentially that, you know, higher fine levels is a true deterrent. Is that, I guess the question is, that something that council would have a chance to weigh in on potentially? And if we were going to do that periodically, I think in the normal budget review process, we would review review a schedule of fines. The same way we review a schedule of, you know, the plots in the cemetery and what we charge for those. It would just be in our normal course of business once a year during the budget process. We would review the schedule and make amendments as required, if that's truly our mandate, if that's something we can control. Anyway.
When we had a bylaw review committee that was comprised of council members and citizens, that was part of the effort to update bylaws to review the financial penalties which were administered, because some of them were quite archaic and were clearly, you know, a 1980 level of penalty was nothing for 2015. And we had started to make some changes in those. Deputy Clerk or Clerk? You don't have a deputy clerk, deputy CAO. Should
We
get a little
do
name
have a,
tag.
we do have a deputy, well, I do, clerk and deputy CAO under my name. It's, we do in fact have a deputy clerk, and when she started with us, before she was a deputy clerk in 2018, that was one of the first things we did, was to go through those fines. And starting in 2018, more bylaws and policies have come before council because those are the things that have been rooted out. In
Mhm.
fact, on the bylaw enforcement officer's report, under the administrative heading, the third bullet says, update the summary offense ticket schedule for various bylaws. That's what that is. That is that listing of that. So I know that the ones that they've been working on, even just recently completed, were the new fines, the fines associated with the new solid waste bylaw. It is quite a lengthy process to make sure that that all goes through there. But we have in fact done a review to find those ones that have, as you say, archaic references and fines and that sort of thing. Those are the ones that have come forward, and we now have an up-to-date summary offense ticket schedule.
So maybe we could,
And
I
will
mean,
we-
that's a
will we
public
be
document.
putting-
We could report that as part of the budget process to Councillor Feeney's suggestion. I don't know about being able to fully review it, but we can certainly report it. As Mo notes, it's quite a document.
Well, just as long
Well,
as
we
we've
have
eliminated
pieces.
the,
Will we have pieces in the mayor's newsletter, by example, or on the town's website to let people know what these changes are?
I'm sorry,
Clerk?
what changes to the?
Well, when you talk about the solid waste bylaw
Yes.
and the new penalties that exist, are we going to make sure our citizens are aware of them?
What we do with that, when that bylaw was passed, we actually have mandated public information pieces that are part of the Municipal Government Act. So when we have a new bylaw appear before council, notification goes out that it's been given first reading. And in our case in Mahone Bay, our policy states that we will have a public hearing. So we also have that notification
Yes.
and to
Yeah.
read the bylaw such and such. And then we have notification after the bylaw has been published. So that goes out through, sorry, after it's been approved. So that goes out through the local paper, the website, Facebook, that sort of thing. We don't specifically break out fines, but we do, all of that includes what
The whole
the
piece.
bylaw is about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Feeney.
well, I would just want to make sure we don't have a situation where town council approves the reinstitution of the village stock rule. You know, we'll have throwing tomatoes at people in the middle of town. Every once in a while, it's good to
No,
update
don't
things,
do that.
right?
Don't do that. Okay, can we get a motion to accept the annual bylaw report? Moved by Councillor Burdick, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any question or any further discussion? On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to the results of the local improvement public information meeting. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we were, just to recap, back in 2020, not that far back, we were directed to schedule a public information meeting to consider the possibility of a local improvement bylaw, which would be a bylaw that enables cost sharing arrangements for new infrastructure extension. The PIM was conducted in, sorry, I always use the shorthand. The public information meeting was conducted in January, and was I will say sparsely attended, as these things often are, especially the PIM, because it happens early in the process. There's nothing to react to. We're looking for people's proactive thoughts and engagement. But for those who were there, and I know you were there, there was a bit of discussion, and I note in the report, I think general support for the idea of bringing forward some type of draft, which would still need to go through the standard bylaw approval process, receive additional public commentary at the hearing. So we're in a bit of a state of flux right now as council determines how best to utilize the new policy and strategy committee, which the terms of reference for which do state that will provide an opportunity for additional consideration by council. There is clearly, I think, an opportunity needed for some additional consideration by council in terms of this bylaw before giving first reading. I'm not recommending we go to first reading. So the recommendation that is presented here at this time is the council directed to be presented to the Policy and Strategy Committee for further discussion. But I suppose I will note that that is presented pending the first meeting of that committee and an opportunity for council to talk about how the committee's time will best be used to prioritize these kind of discussions. So whether it's at that committee or at regular council, I would encourage council to put aside some time for further discussion and eventually hope to see first reading for this or an amended draft.
Okay. Councillor Carver. You're on mute, Councillor.
Mr. CIO, could you refresh my memory about how this issue came up? Was it something identified by staff or identified by residents?
It was identified by staff. We had a number of residents contact us wanting to discuss whether it was possible to cost share on infrastructure for which we're currently waiting on external funding. So we get a lot of inquiries from residents who want to see projects move forward. What's the current status? And sometimes when I say we're waiting on funding, they say, well, would it be possible to cost share? So that is part of the motivation. The other motivation is just as we approach asset management, this is the tool that is typically used when you're talking about those system expansions, like the one that came up earlier this evening with respect to Fairmont Street.
Yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm prepared to move the motion if council is willing.
Please, go ahead.
Let me see if I can find it again. I was hoping to read.
I can put it back on the screen for you, Francis.
No, I have it. I'm ready to move a motion that council directs staff to present the draft local improvement bylaw to the Policy and Strategy Committee for further discussion prior to giving the first reading. And maybe to note that the CAO had done a little bit of an amendment that it's not directly to the Policy and Strategy, but I can't remember what exactly the words he used.
Yeah, I just say leave it the way that it is for now, and then we'll discuss at that meeting what actually is going to happen.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney seconds. Is councillor ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to the bandstand engagement plan.
And Councillor Now has his hand up.
Who does?
Richard, was that?
Oh, Councillor Now.
Just a quick thing before we move on to the next one. The Policy and Strategic Planning Committee, that's scheduled for the 16th, and they scheduled it for the third Tuesday of each month. I am not available on those nights. Just wondering what the possibility of is getting that sort of moved to a more common night. Tuesday nights are an extremely bad night for me, and the third Tuesday is, I have other meetings on that same night. So just wondering what the possibility of, I sent an email, but didn't see any response for it, so.
CAO?
Yeah, I note the concern, Richard. I think right now, clerk, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the terms of reference prescribe the meeting time. Is that correct, or?
I'm not sure if it's in the terms of reference or when it was at
Okay.
the, it was discussed at the council meeting. I think maybe it was
council
just.
would have the power to, at this time,
Today,
determine an alternative time for meeting. Yeah, I think staff have felt we didn't really have, an ability to move on that. But if council now, in consideration, wants to, but certainly be, we can look for other times.
Staff do a doodle thingy on Monday to Friday, not including Thursday? Whether it's the first, second, third, or fourth one of the month?
Could we do a doodle poll and not try and sort it out here?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Let's do a doodle poll.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Good
And
idea.
just while that's being suggested, council has noted a desire to schedule at least one other thing. We've talked about a special meeting of the audit committee with respect to the electrical utility. So maybe while we're scheduling, because there's only so many days to go around, we'll do that one too.
Oh, do that one too. It's always nice to have.
I was
two
going to bring it
doodles
up
in one
tomorrow
day.
at our other special meeting of the audit committee, but I'll just bring it up now. So
Yeah, okay. Doodle,
Thank you.
doodle, doodle. All right. And then let's go to the bandstand engagement plan. Who owns this one?
yeah, so I've presented this one. We've been working on the bandstand now since I came to the town. I guess Mo had put in the first application for external funding to support work on the bandstand, which was approved by the province. And that work was underway when I arrived. And we've now done a second round of improvements, including the roof and walkways and new seating, which I've heard some positive feedback from folks on. But there, throughout that has been a lot of public interest in the bandstand, including donations and a campaign to name it, which the town did accept. So this follows up from that, essentially looking to take advantage of our new public engagement policy, as the mayor mentioned earlier this meeting, to get some specific feedback to support external funding application around the space. And I have had the intention to do this for some time. It was noted in the budget, it was approved back in May. COVID caused a little bit of reconsideration. Obviously, the whole bandstand summer season was canceled. And I think that now, today, there was an introduction, new program from the federal government, Community Spaces, Healthy Communities program. So in light of COVID, I think it's all the more important that we reach out and talk about how we use some of our spaces and how they could potentially be better used, maybe even in light of COVID in the coming year. So put this forward for council's consideration. And I would note that, you know, as it is noted in the report, there may be an opportunity in that survey to ask people if there are other town operated facilities that they may, some modification may potentially improve the use of the space that we're not thinking of. So I would encourage that, even though donations specific to the bandstand would obviously only be used for the bandstand project. So I don't want anybody to be confused about that.
Councillor Burdick.
This is reminding me of the letter from the Mahone Bay Tourism and Chamber of Commerce. I can't remember if it was on the last meeting or if it was previous, but it was about sort of updating things in the park. It seems sort of that might also be these funds might be useful for that if they're
I think,
available.
yeah, they've all been referred to the budget process, have they not?
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those-
that
those
may be
issues
another
around
external
the-
funding source to tap into. I know Councillor Feeney's previous motion on that, we would look at the beautification and streetscaping within the province. We've come back to recently, but
Yeah.
now we could also potentially be looking to this new federal one with respect to COVID, because eating your picnic lunch outside was certainly a big theme of 2020. And I expect it will be again in 2021.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Carver, did you have a question about the bandstand? No? Okay. There is a motion included in your package if somebody would like to make it. Councillor Burdick?
I'd like to make a motion that council approve the bandstand phase 3 engagement plan.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now seconds it. Is council ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? The engagement plan is passed. Thank you. Let's go to the community engagement plan for the greenhouse gas review plan.
So as with the other engagement plans, this one is presented with a recommendation for approval. As council just very recently directed us on the basis of the draft plan that was developed and presented to council at your last meeting, you know, as noted there, it is our expectation to, in line with our commitments to Transition 2050 and Partners for Climate Protection and our low carbon communities funding, we're looking to bring that back for council's consideration and adoption. This engagement plan would be to solicit some public feedback that would inform council's consideration of the plan.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the greenhouse gas public engagement plan moved by Councillor Feeney? Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Kangata seconds. Is council ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to council items. The first one is the request for council to co-host the Council of Canadians session. Councillor Carver?
Well, Mayor, you've skipped an item, 7.1, the committee appointment.
Oh, see, I've got it in black, not blue. I'm looking for the blue stuff. Okay, for the Watershed Advisory Committee. What is your wish, council? Councillor Wilson?
I move that council appoint Tom Ernst to membership in the what's it called again? The Watershed Advisory Council,
Committee?
yes.
Councillor Now?
I'll second that.
Okay. Does Mr. Ernst's land extend into the watershed area?
I don't know.
Okay.
All
So
of
Clerk,
the
can you
applications.
confirm that everybody was eligible? Okay, yeah.
Are they? Okay. I recall from other years, that was one of the things that frequently was queried. Right?
He lives
Okay,
on
so
that
we
end of
have
the
a
lake, but I'm not
motion.
sure.
Pardon me?
He lives on that end, on the Oakland side of the lake down on that
does.
far end, but I'm not sure if his land actually extends into the,
We did
I think
confirm
the
that all
CAO
everybody's
has
name
confirmed
was
that he
eligible.
does. Councillor Feeney?
Is there just one open spot on that committee? Just one spot.
Yeah, there's one spot for resident.
fair enough.
There's
One spot
also
for a
a
resident.
representative for MODL council position there as well. So there's
Okay.
there's representation for everybody else through their council member as well.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Now. Are you ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Mr. Ernst?
Mayor, while you're,
Yes?
while we're on that topic, I would like to make a motion that council direct staff to communicate with the Oakland Property Owners Association about their interest in nominating the member that would sit on this committee instead of our town council scrutinizing applications. Was that my motion? Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney seconds.
Thank you, Councillor
CAO?
Feeney. I'll just say why I think that it's useful. It's useful to have a seconder because then you can talk about it.
That's right.
The reason I thought it was important that the Oakland Property Owners Association be given the option of appointing the representative to this committee is because they know their people, or they know the issues, they know who would be a good representative of their interests more than we do, in my view. That's my perspective on it. In a sense, it's not just our committee. So I think
Okay.
I think it would be valuable.
CAO, you have a comment?
I'm not entirely familiar with how the Oakland Property Owners Association is constituted, but I do believe their geographic area is different from the watershed. So it doesn't change this motion's ability to pass or be actioned, but a complication that I can see arising there would be somebody who may be a resident of the watershed and not part of the area for this association, or somebody who is part of this area for the association, but outside of the watershed. So something that may be a challenge with this approach.
Councillor Now.
Yes, I agree that it'd be nice to have their suggestion or their recommendation. I don't think they should have the power to appoint that person, but they could make a recommendation to the town that this person represent that area on this committee. And they would have to also follow the guidelines that we had set out for our council committee.
Requiring them to be part of the watershed area. Okay. Deputy Mayor's next, Councillor Feeney.
And that's basically where my question was, will we have to change the policy around committee appointments if we do that? I think it's a good point to allow the community to do that, but maybe we need to change a few pieces on our end to make that possible.
Okay.
If I may,
Councillor
I think the intention of the motion was just to have some communication, initial discussion, no commitment, but so that all those questions could be explored.
Okay. You've heard the motion?
Mayor, just one point of clarification.
Yes, please.
The Oakland Community Group, it's my understanding that they don't necessarily geographically represent folks who live within the watershed area. I think that's the point the CAO is making. So, like, while I believe that it would be better for everyone involved if there was more, we had some group from that area influencing. I'm not sure if the Oakland Community Group is any more relevant than if they're not in the watershed area.
Perhaps that becomes part of the question that staff asks the Oakland group, is whether they have someone who lives within the watershed area that they would want to appoint to represent their interests.
Like, do we even know who? We must know because of the PIDs and the land, the AAA. We must know who the property owners are that would be notionally eligible. So it looks like the eligibility question, not to belabor the point, because I think Councilor Carver's, the spirit of the motion, I think everyone would agree with. I just wonder if it's those folks. I wonder if we're better off sending a letter to the actual people who are, qualified based on the land ownership, and sending a letter to those folks and asking for more feedback, or their concurrence, or let those folks choose of the three candidates. Anyway, I'm out of my depth here because I don't understand the geographies, but.
All right. Councillor Burdick, you were frantically waving your arm there.
Was I? Oh, yeah. The one thing I did notice when I was looking at the terms of reference and at previous meetings and agendas was that it appeared to average a meeting a year. Is that right? So is this
every 6 months?
Oh, okay. So okay.
By design, whether they do it or not, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just to say that I do understand the spirit of having people be asked if they would like to nominate folks, but it doesn't seem like maybe if it were a larger committee, or if there were two people from the community involved, that would be a really good idea. But I think if it's just a fairly irregular, maybe regular, but once or twice a year, It's not quite as pressing.
No, we do have a motion on the floor. It's been moved. It's been seconded. Is council ready for the question? All in favor?
No, I'd like to hear the motion again, because I can't remember what we're voting for, what the motion exactly is. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That that council directs staff to communicate with the Oakland Property Owners Association to determine their interest in nominating someone from the for the landowner position on the Oakland Lake Watershed Advisory Committee.
So this is in the future because we've already nominated
Yes,
somebody
That's
else.
correct.
okay. Is council ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? 4. Motion's carried. So staff will so investigate. Thank you. Now let's go back to 7.1. The request to co-host the Council of Canadians session. And this was a presentation that we had at our last council meeting. You've had some time to digest it. From my perspective, one of the issues is that we really don't know what precisely the Council of Canadians group are going to discuss. And even though one may have a personal opinion on something as desirable as the Just Society, you will be perceived as speaking for council, which of course you can't do if council has never discussed and motioned on the particular topic. Councillor Wilson, your thoughts, please.
Yes, my thinking on this would be exactly the same as if the Fraser Institute came and asked us to co-sponsor a seminar on, let's say, offshore drilling. I don't think that we should be in the position or put ourselves in the position of co-sponsoring a group that is blatantly political with a very particular point of view.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment, please? Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'm not as familiar as many with the Council Canadians. I know we had a delegation that came and specifically said at our last meeting that the organization, which is, well known across the country, is apolitical. But I do take Councillor Wilson's point about, and your point about, the precedent that it sets. So, I think it's something we need to be somewhat cautious about, as much as, even relative to, the importance of that group. And I'm sure the conversation will be pretty benign. It's, and they've been here many times.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Kangata, then Councillor Burdick, and then Councillor Carver.
I think, well, when listening to the presentation last time, I think that the issues that are intended to be discussed are pretty key issues. So I would be thinking we can't find ways to support them. I think if we are uncomfortable with the co-hosting piece, maybe the question would be, how can we support them to get that conversation going without it being a council event, if that's something that they're willing to entertain. I think as a community group, it might be a good thing to support them. I think they're inspiring conversations that need courage and need somebody to support, especially people in leadership. And we are in leadership, so they've reached out to us. It would be a good thing to support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burdick?
Yes, that further to what the deputy mayor is saying, maybe instead of co-hosting, there could be a presence from somebody on council who is comfortable being there. We haven't had specific maybe motions about homelessness, climate change. Well, climate change is on our menu. I would
We did
say.
have climate change, yeah.
Yeah, and
We declared a
discrimination.
climate emergency.
Right. So it is actually part of our mandate and shared vision for the town that these are subjects that we are involved in and have an opinion on. Discrimination it's a big term, but I'm assuming that means racism and environmental racism and how that would, yeah. So I'm not opposed to either to having a presence, that Mahone Bay, the town of Mahone Bay as a unit have a presence there, but maybe not co-hosting.
A presence in the gallery, if you will, in the audience, or?
Well, there was a specific request to either the mayor or the deputy, yeah, to be a panelist, and possibly if that's, I don't want to offer you all for that, but that was the sort of specific request there, and maybe that part one of you would be interested.
Yeah.
And
Councillor Carver next, Councillor Feeney.
Oh, no, me.
It's you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I was after Councillor Burdick. And I was going to lose my thought. So the request was for the town to co-present, which I understood to mean co-host, and so what I didn't understand was what's in it for the town. What's the benefit for the town in co-hosting it? I just wasn't quite sure about that. And I agree earlier with what the others have said, that having a member, if somebody from council was invited to be on a panel, that's different from the town co-hosting or co-presenting the whole show.
Councillor Feeney,
So
and then Deputy Mayor.
in my opinion, hosting means providing hospitality. We have a venue. We're a this organization's been in our town many times over the last 10 years, as I understand it. I think the last time I attended one of their events, they had 200 or 300 people at the Mahone Bay Center. In fact, there were so many people you couldn't get at the door. They had to actually ask people to leave. So, I mean, this is a credible organization that people know who they are. And I have every confidence that either you or the deputy mayor will be able to articulate that your individual presence is really there as elected officials, but the conversation that is happening is just that. It's just a conversation, and that's what we do in town. We come on into town, we're gonna have a conversation, and we're happy to host you. And there'll be some coffee and some refreshments afterwards at the back of the meeting room. So I think this is pretty benign. I don't believe there's any, any extreme. I mean, I think there's no harm, no foul here, Mayor. I would just proceed and invite those folks to the meeting and have a wonderful afternoon and talk about the issues of the day. And I have every confidence that people will know what it's well intentioned.
And I think if council supports that notion, it's entirely doable. The difficulty is if I was going to go to this meeting and someone asks a question and I speak to it, it may be perceived that I'm speaking for council when in fact, except for the issue of the climate emergency, I'm not. Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. And it was just to say that it is possible to participate, and being very clear that you're there not as a spokesperson for council, and the views that you air are not necessarily agreed positions for council, but it's in your position as an elected leader that you're providing, I guess, some context to very important conversations that need to be had. So if it can be with that caveat, I think it would be a comfortable, a good thing to participate in.
And arguably, it may be a sentiment that one would expect to find in this council, right? Maybe, Councillor Carver?
I don't agree with the deputy mayor's suggestion that the mayor or deputy mayor could be speaking at a public meeting and not be considered to be representing council. I don't yeah,
I felt the deputy mayor was suggesting that one would make it clear to the group that you were not speaking as on behalf of council.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there, just like right now, I wear different hats, and there will be meetings I'll go to, and I'll be very, very clear. This is how I'm showing up to this meeting. I'm either showing up as an NSH I guess, employee. I'm either showing up as Francis, and I'm either showing up as a council role. So that's, for me, that's how I look at it. That I can delineate how I show up in a public space.
I don't think it's me or it's you delineating, it's the people in the audience delineating, keeping it straight.
Yeah. The invitation says specifically to ensure a municipal lens. I wish to include the mayor or deputy mayor. So it's a specific invitation for a particular role in a municipal council. I don't think you can separate those things out and go personal in that.
Okay. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult situation to be able to separate your own feelings and the way you're representing council. It's you can make that statement, but how the people are going to perceive it is going to be entirely different. I also agree that, you know, I think we should go ahead and co-host this, because we can co-host it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with everything that they are saying and passing at that conference.
Okay. Councillor Feeney and then Councillor Burdick.
I mean, we do it all the time. Every member of council participates in other organizations, and you know, I have every confidence that between you and the deputy mayor, you'll be able to communicate the fact that, you know, opinions matter, and I'd be very forthcoming in what those opinions are. But I think the real key message here is this is an important Canadian organization. There's an opportunity to have them come to our town for an afternoon and have a conversation that I think people will want to hear. So come on in. We're happy to host you for the afternoon. There's going to be some conversation. The mayor and the deputy mayor are going to participate. We'll have a coffee after the meeting and chat with our friends, and then that'll be the end of it. So I'd move that we would move forward with this request and participate. I think it's a good opportunity for the town and for the deputy mayor and the mayor.
Councillor Burdick.
Yes, I don't think that there's too much to fear in this, in the sense that the things that are likely to be discussed, we do have, you know, homelessness is connected to sort of our housing situation and out-migration from towns if people are finding that they can't afford to live here. Climate change, we've made that declaration. And we do have policies around discrimination or not wanting it, not allowing it. So I don't think don't think that you need to worry too much about your response unless you anticipate having a really off the wall response about any of those things, which I think is unlikely. So I would second the motion. Yeah.
So is that a motion you're making, Councillor Feeney? And what is the motion? That we respond positively to the request from the Council of Canadians?
Yes. And
okay.
And I think we respond favorably to the request from the delegation from last week. And then we'll find out what the next steps are as far as what co-hosting means.
They've also asked for technical assistance from one of our staff. Right. CAO, is that doable?
Yeah, my understanding of the motion on the table right now is that we would be agreeing to this request in principle, which includes agreeing in principle to provide some support to actually conducting the event in the format requested. We don't know what that will look like, and you know, we'll have to look at our capacity, but you know, I think there is something that we can do to assist in that regard in line with the motion that's on the table.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. Is council ready for the question? On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Burdick, did you have a comment?
Well, could I make a suggestion? It's a little bit after 9, that we take maybe a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. 5-minute scotch break. We'll see you at 9:15.
Sorry, Mo, I did jinx it.
No, I think it was me. I'm sorry.
back
Okay,
soon.
So just a
Who
reminder
turned
to
the tap
everyone,
on anyway?
just a reminder to everyone that this is still live streaming. So please think of that when you think about muting or turning off your cameras. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There it is there. Hi, 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 hi. Okay. T T T T T T T la da da. Tow truck came and took my snow blower away again.
Uh-oh.
I had it over 3 weeks ago for a tune-up. In the Sunday storm, I pulled the cord. Second time I pulled the cord, there it was in my hand. So I had to get the tow truck to come back and pick it up again. I haven't got a way to transport it.
Big drama, my hot water tank caught on fire.
Caught on fire?
Yeah, thank God we were both home just 2 days ago. We're just minding our own business. Like, do you smell something? Went downstairs and smoke and flames coming out of it and the whole 9 yards.
Is it a propane water heater, Joseph?
Electric.
No kidding.
Caught a lucky break. Would have had to call Richard and his friends.
Hello, was Richard busy?
Just need to borrow your fire truck for 10 minutes.
Just for a little while, just to check it out.
Okay, we're down to Councillor Carver for the next item. Councillor Carver. Bingo. Okay. Everybody's back. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2. Okay. Next item on the agenda, 7.3. Council CAO relations is Councillor Carver's item.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm bringing to council the idea that we would consider developing a policy that would provide guidelines about the relationship between staff, CAO, and council. We have policies on code of ethics for staff, and we have code of conduct for elected officials. And those are quite separate. The idea of a policy that would govern the relationship works on the area between those two separate policies. So it would complement those policies, and the focus is on relationship and empowering staff and council, mutually empowering staff and council in their interdependent roles, which are always working for the betterment of the community. Some of the topics that might be included in such a policy could be guidelines for effective communication, reasonable expectations of each, handling citizen complaints, how to the procedures for councillor questions and for staff response. Also noting that all councillors are equal, so that they all have equal access to information and equal treatment. Recognition of professionalism. Sorry, did you say something?
No, I was just, I'm looking at your submission.
Yep.
And in particular, the resolution part about directing staff, and I'm wondering if this should be referred to our new policy committee.
Well, I have the same question. Can I finish?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. So it's a framework to carry out the respective roles in concert with one another, and to ensure the effective running, effective activity on behalf of the community. So I have brought a motion, and I did have the question about how to direct it at the end. I'll go through it, and perhaps we can discuss that at the end. So whereas the literature on municipal governance and management frequently cites the positive relationship between council and staff as a key component of effective municipal government, and whereas the town has no formal policy governing the interactions and relationship between council and staff, and whereas some municipal government experts and organizations recommend that municipalities adopt policies governing the staff-council relationship, and whereas the province of Ontario has set a precedent by requiring that all Ontario municipalities adopt policies that support positive and effective council-staff relationships, and whereas such council staff policies provide guidelines on a variety of issues that may include, but are not limited to, role clarification, processes for communication and council inquiries, procedures to address concerns, identifying relevant organizational tools, success indicators, and policy review. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to investigate the effectiveness of the council staff relationship policies where they are in place, including any in the province of Nova Scotia, and to prepare a report on the possible application of such a policy in the town of Mahone Bay, and be it further resolved that the report include reference to any relevant existing legislation, policies, and or guidelines. So that is the resolution or the motion. And if there's a seconder, or before that, we could.
Seconded, Deputy Mayor. Okay.
And then there is a question of to leave it as is, or to amend it to with some reference to the Policy and Strategy Committee, which we don't fully understand yet in terms of how it will work.
Okay.
So is there a suggestion from staff about wording of that in order to leave it as it is, or to include a reference to the Policy and Strategy Committee?
CAO?
Yeah, my concern with the wording as is that it does direct staff to engage in was probably somewhere between 20 and 40 hours of work before discussion at the committee. And, you know, ultimately, I think one of the big things that we're faced with at this committee is the number of policies and bylaws that council has identified for review and where staff time should best be allocated. So I would urge that council have the conversation first, whether it's at the committee or however that takes place, before determining if the review as per this motion would take place, rather than doing this and then having the discussion.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you're going to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I was seconding it so that we can discuss it, and basically of the opinion that rather than direct staff, is that let's move it to that Policy and Strategy Committee so that we're able to. We talked about prioritizing. So what comes to the top?
Power off.
When we get there.
Are you proposing an amendment, Deputy Mayor, to the original motion to move it to the Policy and Strategy Committee?
If Councillor Carver is comfortable with that, yes, I am.
Do we have a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Feeney?
I would, with the further amendment, that it would be referred to the March strategy meeting versus the February strategy meeting next week.
Okay. All right. So we would CAO.
Yeah, two
Wagging
things.
your finger over there.
Just two things for clarity. I believe that Deputy Mayor was requesting, as the seconder, was requesting Councillor Carver as the mover's permission for friendly amendments. It wouldn't require Councillor Feeney to second that if Councillor Carver
A
wanted to
friendly
accept
amendment. I keep forgetting. those.
Yeah, another option. But I did want to say, in terms of putting it on the March one, I would suggest not putting the month. It's understood that at our next meeting, what we would do is we talk about, okay, so going forward, how are we going to approach all these policies and bylaws? So I think it wouldn't be coming forward to that one as, saying that that's going to be the discussion at our next meeting, but rather it will be on the list of what I believe Maureen has about a dozen right now on that list. And we won't be going into depth on them at that first meeting. We'll be talking about when in the coming year, when are we going to go into depth on each of them, would be my expectation for that meeting. So
So we have a
that's just
friendly
clarification.
amendment to Councillor Carver's motion that her resolution be accommodated by the Policy and Strategy Committee.
I'd just like some clarification again around process in a committee that we haven't, or we're not yet familiar with. So if we refer this, if the direction is to refer it, for council to refer it to the Policy and Strategy Committee
For discussion.
for discussion, then at that committee that would have to be referred back to council for action. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councillor CAO?
Yeah, I think the conversation will be, we look at the list and say, which of these policies and bylaw amendments that have been requested by council needs to have a significant opportunity for conversation at the policy committee before it would come back to council. I can't prejudge the council will say they all do. Some of them are more at the level of housekeeping. So part of what we need to determine is, does every policy that's presented actually go through that committee for discussion, and how will council determine which ones do and which ones could appear on a council agenda? Because as you know, when we get to looking at this list, a number of them are things like the clerk has been directed to come up with new wording around being able to eject someone from a meeting that describes the process for an electronic meeting. I mean, that may not warrant a significant amount of discussion. So at the first meeting, I think we talk about how are we bringing these things forward now, because the intention, as I understood it from council, was to create space where space is desired, not to create another layer of a process if it wasn't necessary. So just trying to make the room for council to still have that discussion when we do get together for the meeting, which will not be on the 16th as per the discussion we've had about sending out a doodle poll, but will hopefully be soon. I know that's not absolute clarity, but that's my understanding at the current time.
Clear as mud to me.
So
Councillor Carver.
forgive me, I need to get my head around this. So you're suggesting that the motion simply refer this question to the Policy and Strategy Committee, and that the Policy and Strategy Committee, which consists of council members, would then prioritize the items that are on the agenda. And then what would it do with this? It's a request for a new policy, whereas most of the others you've mentioned are existing ones or have already been referred by council.
I mean, I see this as having the same, you said it's a new policy, but council earlier this meeting referred a recommendation for local improvement bylaw, which is also new, to that same committee. So I would just see it as going on that same list for consideration.
Okay, so the revised motion would be to refer the question of developing a staff council relationship policy to the Policy and Strategy Committee. Is that right?
Okay, so that is your amended motion?
I'm just checking the wording with the CAO. I'm waiting for a nod.
But yeah, I can't say whether it achieves your objectives, but it makes sense to me, and it would reflect the process I think we've discussed as a group here.
Right. All right, I'll stick with that.
Okay. Councillor Feeney, you were the seconder?
No, the mayor.
Or the deputy mayor was?
Deputy Mayor was, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Kangata was the seconder. Do you agree with the change in Councillor Carver's motion? Okay. Is Councillor ready for the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Councillor Carver. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your patience. Let's go to Lunenburg County Senior Safety Monthly Report for January. In the interest of time, does anyone have any questions on the report? What about the annual report? Councillor Burdick?
I did have one question about the monthly report, because there is mention in the annual report, actually, I guess both reports. There's a mention in the annual report about the usage in Mahone Bay of the services, but for January, there appeared to be nothing for Mahone Bay.
Yes, and I don't know the answer to that question, but it could actually, I mean, it could happen.
Okay.
Any time. It depends on the referrals.
Okay.
So there may not have been any activity or new referrals in that month.
Okay.
But my impression is that the statistics in Mahone Bay remain pretty constant through all the reports. And it looks like it's a fairly representative proportion compared to the other municipalities.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can we get a motion to accept the report for January?
I don't think these need
No, we
motions.
don't need to do
They're
that.
just they're just reports.
Okay, good. Thank
I
you.
don't think they need motions.
Makes it easier because we can go right on to the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, in particular, the Accessibility Draft Plan. CAO, are you on that?
Well, I can just
You're
comment
the
that there definitely is a
advisor,
request for
are you
motion
not?
here. And the request was presented, just for everybody's information for the public, to a joint session of the councils in the county.
Yeah.
Municipalities are all contributing together to the development of a joint plan for the county. We have representatives here. Councillor Feeney has been our representative. I can't actually remember if we switched that where the committee appointments just happened. We haven't had a meeting of that since, but believe that Sarah, accessibility coordinator, outgoing accessibility coordinator, presented a request to everyone on the 26th that the councils approve this draft as presented. And I can report that MODL, and this was shared with council earlier today, MODL's council did meet and has approved that draft plan to date. I don't believe the others have met yet.
Would you like to offer some comments on that?
Well, I was interested in making the motion, but before making the motion, I wanted to ask the CAO if it would be appropriate to make the same motions that Modal made, the 3 motions that you circulated today.
Yeah, I'm not, I didn't mean that to be a recommendation. Clearly they go a bit further, but I would certainly support the spirit of the recommendation to call for additional funding. If you're referring to that one, I certainly, I see why they have made that, and it addresses a need that I think is really clear, that we're setting ourselves up to have a very challenging process to implement this plan. And the province has charged us with development of it, so clearly their assistance would be supported. So I wasn't circulating those as a recommendation, but I would absolutely support that.
I'm trying to pull them up and my computer's being very slow, so I'm not getting it, but I will propose the original motion, which that the town council approve the Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan as presented by the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee, and authorize the submission of the plan to the Provincial Accessibility Directorate.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? Did you wish to comment, Deputy Mayor? You're on mute.
Sorry,
There we go.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Asking for a friendly amendment because I'm supportive of us doing the 3 motions. I have them here if you want me to read them.
We can do them
Councillor
separately.
Carver?
We can
What?
do them separately.
Okay.
Okay, this one has been moved, it's been seconded. Is council ready for the question? All in favor? Motion one's carried. CAO?
Just having pulled these up, so I had spoken to the substance of the second one. So that's the one with respect to provincial funding. Did just want to reference the status of the third one so that everybody understands where that would sit relative to us. We do have already a budgeted project to do that the follow-up operational plan. So it would be essentially saying we would now go out and do a request for proposals for the development of that plan. So we've already got a budget. We couldn't proceed with the request for proposals to develop the plan because we didn't have the Lunenburg County plan to use as the framework for that development. So in our case, I'm not sure what MODL means when they made the third motion, but in our case, I would understand that motion if it is made and accepted to be authorization to proceed to a request for proposals as we have already budgeted for that project. So just so everybody would understand that.
Might be useful if we could have had the three motions on the screen, CAO. It's
Oh, I
kinda
can
hard
do
to go
that if
look
you,
for them.
I can do that if you like. I've got them in front of me here.
Councillor Carver, did you want to make another motion?
Well, I think the deputy mayor was prepared to make the next
Oh,
motion.
he was. Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I move a motion that that council writes to the Premier of Nova Scotia, the Minister of Justice, Minister responsible for the Accessibility Act, as well as NSFM, to lobby for municipal funding for the implementation of municipal accessibility plans.
Okay,
Second,
seconded by Councillor Carver. Is council ready for the question? All in favor? That motion's carried. And CAO, you say we don't need the third one because we've already approved funding?
Yeah, I mean, it would be in order to have a motion for staff to develop and publish a request for proposals for development of our operational plan. That would be our step. MODL's motion says to direct staff to develop the plan for council's consideration. We've noted from the beginning, and that's why we have a budget, we don't have the capacity to develop that plan in-house.
Councillor Carver?
yeah, so I would move that town council directs staff to prepare an RFP for a facilitator to conduct the, no, to develop the plan. Is that right? Have I got it right?
Engineers in this case, it's not public
engineer, but
consultation, but
okay.
yeah.
And then, yeah, to prepare an RFP for an engineer who will develop an appendix to the overarching Lunenburg County accessibility plan for the town of Mahone Bay for consideration of council at a future meeting.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds.
Mayor, a question?
Yes,
So,
please.
just trying to understand the spirit of the motion. So the accessibility plan, Lunenburg County accessibility plan is rolling out. I think all of the municipalities in the region will, are on the same page, which was the original plan, and across the province, I would suppose. But we're not really ready to roll out, capital initiatives based on that plan yet, are we? Like, is this motion basically trying to roll forward with some of the accessibility capital requirements?
So I can describe what the operational plan is, because it's been a year since we put the budget in place for it. So essentially, the Lunenburg County plan would prescribe a very high level target. It would say there's a whole bunch of good examples in there, but pedestrian infrastructure will be in all areas suitable for persons with accessibility barriers. We would then go and look at all of our pedestrian infrastructure and look at where it doesn't meet that standard. And then we would develop recommendations to meet that standard. And I didn't do a very good job because we've been in this meeting for a few hours of coming up with a good example, but there's all kinds of different areas where we now need to take our specific infrastructure and compare it to the standard that's been developed for the county and say what we would need to do, if anything, to close that gap. And so the operational plan essentially says to an outside contractor, come in and look at, in light of this plan for the county, look at our infrastructure and tell us where those shortcomings are and what at minimum would be needed to close that gap. And then we would determine how that fits into our capital program.
Mayor, just a final point on that. So I think the motion's well intended, although I think it may be just a little premature, especially given the last motion to write the provincial government across the board looking for funding. This type of RFP seems exactly like I would expect that the province, now that it has the program and the plans are rolling out, that they're going to come to the table with funding to do the very thing that Councillor Carver's motion would assist with. So, always looking for the right cadence and sequencing of events. I think it might be worthwhile for us to put a note on this particular motion and then revisit it just maybe 2 months down the road from now, when we have more feedback from the province about how they're going to respond. Because my hope would be that the province will come forward with funding, and that this particular project would be funded, would be eligible for that funding.
Okay.
And just a quick note on that, it was reported in the report to council, we now have until April 1st of 2022. So, given that timeline extension, it's reasonable to expect that within that year, knowing the province is pushing us, that they might come out with that type of an announcement. And as long as we have time to go out to RFP and hire someone and do the work, which I don't think will take 12 months, then we should have plenty of time to see if some funding is forthcoming in the near future. So just wanted to support that timeline.
Thank you.
So does it make any sense to make a further amendment to Councillor Carver's motion that talks about that April 2022 timeline, so that we could have the motion on the books, but also give staff the time to let the world unfold, and instead of rushing to more out the door, next month with an RFP, we'd have a motion on the books that said, we're looking for funding, as no one does a better job finding the dollars like Dylan does. So I have every confidence if they're out there, he'll get it. But I just don't know. I don't think, Dylan, those dollars are identified yet.
Decidedly not. That came up on the 26th. I mean, there's $10,000 a year for accessibility. I don't even think that could be applied to the development of the plan, although we could check it out, but there's plenty of places we could use it for actual improvements right away. It seems to be anticipated the province would understand that if we're going to be doing this, we would need support. But I'm challenged by the timelines involved. So I think it makes sense to wait and see. And then ultimately, like we discussed with transportation improvements last year, if we don't have funding by a certain point, we should go ahead. To that end, if we amended this motion yet again and the motion were to go ahead, it would stay on your report to council. We wouldn't be able to action it, and then it would give us something to refer back to at each meeting. I don't like to do that with too many things because they're in the budget, so they're also going to be on page 30 of your report to council anyway. So I'm just going to type the exact same thing on page 2 and page 30. So in that way, I think ultimately whether a motion passed or didn't right now wouldn't change anything. But there's no harm in it. And also I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you need to do it. So withdraw or amend as per Councillor Feeney's suggestion, if you want to give a few more months.
Councillor Feeney?
I'd be happy to withdraw the motion
Thank you.
at this time.
Seconder was Councillor Burdick. And you agree? Okay. Thank you. That brings us down to new business. Doth we have any new business, Councillor Burdick?
We doth.
You doth.
forgive me for this is the first time that I've done this, but I'd like to make notice of a forthcoming motion
Yes?
to direct staff to orchestrate public engagement in the form of a survey on the town logo.
CAO?
Oh, just because Councilor Burdick said it was the first time she'd done this. So you, as a notice of motion, you don't have to have the exact wording of it. You can just say that
Just
you're
that you're
giving.
going to give notice of motion.
Yeah, yeah. And then by 5 days prior to the next meeting, you need to get the wording into Maureen. So there's a chance to workshop that a little bit further. You don't have to.
Thank you. And is there a spelling bee? Because no.
Okay, so we have a notice of motion. I don't know. Okay. So that is the end of our regular business. Is there anyone online with a question? No, no one's there?
I have 11 people still watching, but there are no, no comments.
Okay.
Sorry, no questions. Pardon me. No
Thank you.
questions.
Hearing that, would entertain a motion to go in camera to discuss contract negotiations under MGA 22-2C. So moved by Councillor Feeney. Do we have seconder? Councillor Burdick on the question. All in favor? Okay, we are now in camera. If we can turn off the YouTube feed. And I think